All right. Well, thank you to everyone who has made it for today's webcast. I am Brad Robinson with Liberty Technology Advisors. Today, as you can see on the screen, we're going to be talking about what are the real benefits of ERP project management. A quick look at today's agenda. We'll do some brief introductions and then spend most of the time today discussing the topic, what are those real benefits of ERP project management? And then we'll finish up with question and answer. Just a note on the Q&A, if you do have a question at any point in time during the webcast, please go ahead and submit that through the Q&A or the chat portals. And if it makes sense, we'll address that right during the webcast. But for the sake of time, we may just hold off and keep it for the Q&A section at the end. But definitely, if a question comes up, please go ahead and submit that question right away. Here is a look at who we are, Liberty Technology Advisors. We are a 100% independent management consulting company. We were founded in 1995, and our sole focus is to improve our clients' business performance, systems, and business processes. And we do that with our team of objective and experienced consultants, and we're actively engaged at every step of every stage of the project. Here's a quick look at what we do. We offer enterprise software and ERP selection, implementation, and project management, as well as business process reengineering and optimization, as well as technology advisory services like interim CIO, cloud strategy, roadmaps, and value-added services. If you have a project that maybe isn't performing as well as it should be and needs some project rescue, if you're going through some change throughout the organization and you need help managing that, we do offer those services as well. Today, we will be joined by Joe Nordstrom. Joe is the Director of ERP Business Consulting with LTA and has an extensive background in the ERP world. You can see a bio and some more detailed information about Joe on the screen here, but he has been a Director of Enterprise Business Systems Consulting, Senior Consultant, and yep, you can see really his leadership experience right there on the screen. And I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joe to get started. So Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for participating. And I don't know how many of you are involved currently in an ERP implementation, or if you're considering an ERP implementation, or just thinking about the possibility of that at some point in the future, or if you happen to be somebody who supports ERP implementations, you want to get a perspective on what some of the benefits are of having a good ERP project management skill set in the implementation. So just some of the things to consider. ERP implementations are very challenging. There's a lot of work associated with them. They can take a long time, and you're transforming your business. And it's an opportunity to do more than just change the technology. It's an opportunity to change processes, change standards, change expectations, and to some degree, even change the culture of the organization. So there's a lot of challenges outside of just technology challenges. In fact, the technology side of it is maybe one of the least challenging of the ERP implementation. They take a lot of time, a lot of resources, internal resources. They take financial resources as well, but they take a lot of people time. And so you have to invest a lot of your organization into this transition. There's a lot of risk associated with that. You are changing your business. You're changing the way that you do business. You're potentially migrating from one system to another, or if you're a smaller company in the growth path, then you might be implementing an ERP for the very first time. And so you're very much changing the way that you do your business. There's risk associated with that. And things can go wrong when you do that. So the question that we have here is, how do you achieve an ERP implementation successfully, keeping everything on scope, on budget, and on time? A little bit of context on that, and you might step back and say, well, we're going to have an ERP vendor helping us with this implementation. They're very good at what they do. They're very good at implementing systems. They're very good at managing their own resources, managing their own deliverables, making sure that they're doing the things that they need to do to make the project successful. If you have a good implementation partner, that's a huge step toward a successful implementation. But you have to recognize that more than half of the work relies on the client. The client is going to be doing an awful lot. And if the client isn't able to do the things that need to get done, you have a lot of risk with the implementation. The client can't take a step back and say, I'm going to let the ERP vendor do this and let me know when they're done. That can't work because there's so much that's unique to a particular company that the vendor cannot know what's necessary for an ERP implementation, for an ERP to be implemented successfully for that client. There's a lot of interdependent tasks. It looks like a lot that's on the screen right here. This is just a handful. I'm not going to go through them. I just want you to realize that there are an awful lot of things that the client has to do. Purchasing and installing server infrastructure, that if you're doing a SaaS solution isn't the case, but you still have technology implications if you're going to be putting in barcode scanners or things like that, or if you have to upgrade your PCs or that type of thing. So you still might have some infrastructure considerations there. But the rest of it is all stuff that's going to happen almost independent of whatever the system is that you're putting in. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to run your business in the future. You have to determine what that future state is going to look like. That takes time. It takes effort. The planning that you do up front on that is going to pay for itself manifold both during the implementation, but also after you go live in your use of the system. There's a lot of work that you have to do in terms of the data conversion. There's work that you have to do with configuring the system. You might think, well, the vendor's going to do that. Well, they know how to configure the system, but they don't know exactly how they need to do it for you. And so you have to be in there helping them do that configuration, making a lot of decisions about the configuration, testing it, determining what needs to be tested to determine whether or not the system's going to be able to meet your needs, all of that type of thing. So there's an awful lot of work that you need to do. And to be able to accomplish that is very challenging. It takes somebody really, really focused on it. There's a lot of risks. I'm not going to go over these as well. This is something that that you'll be able to take another look at when we send out the copy of the presentation after the webcast. But these are just some risks that go sort of hand in hand with some of the other things. But if you don't have executive commitment, if you don't have the subject matter experts available, if you don't have a willingness to change within the organization, if you've got other projects that are going on that might have an impact on it, all of that type of thing, there's a lot of things that could impact it. And one of the key ones really is having that focus within the organization that this is something that you have to invest a lot of time in, and you keep that laser focus on getting this completed. So what you really need to have a successful implementation is a realistic project plan. So it needs to be something that's not ideal, because things are never ideal. You want to be able to have time in there for rethinking, time in there for testing, time in there for validation of processes that you've determined that you want to have in place, time in there for training everybody and retraining, because the first time you train won't necessarily work, all of that type of thing. So you want to have a realistic project plan. Effective project governance, there's a couple of different aspects of this, but probably the most important one is to manage scope. You need to have a process for determining what scope changes you want to accept within the project. And you want to have a fairly rigorous process for approving any scope changes, so that you don't just keep going through this spiral of changes to a project scope and therefore extending the project over and over again. You want to have a team, and this is really an important part. You want to have a team in there that's that stays engaged, that you want to have your best people on the project because they're setting the stage for your organization going forward. You want to have an implementation approach that really supports a solid implementation. You want to have the tools and the techniques and the risk management and all of that, the issue tracking, all of that you need to have for a successful implementation. And you need to have a lot of communication, both internally within the organization, within the project team, between the implementation partner and the team, with the rest of the organization. Communication's critical for a successful implementation. And really, most important, you need to have active project management. What do we mean by that? Active project management is more than just tracking and reporting on what's going on within the project. It's much more than that. In fact, that's probably, it's a necessary, but it's a fairly small part of it. When we say active project management, you're taking that step back and you're looking at the forest. You're spending most of your time focused on the forest. The trees are critically important, but you have to take that step back and really understand what's going on, what's going to be happening. You have to anticipate things are going to be happening. You have to prepare for them ahead of time. You have to prioritize them. You have to understand the implications of decisions that are made or actions that are taken. Or if something doesn't work, what's the implication on other parts of the project, and what do you have to do to triage that? All of that type of thing. You also have to be able to hold people accountable for any of the things that are being done within the project. You have to know who's responsible for it. You have to determine who the right person is to be responsible for it. You have to make sure that they're aware of what their deadlines are, all of that type of thing. The third bullet that you see there, being able to differentiate between a nice to have and need to have. You're going to have a lot of people within a project that say, hey, it would be really cool if, in addition to what we've said, it would also do these other things. So you have to be able to take that step back and say, is this something that we need? Is it something that we want to potentially increase the budget for the project, extend the schedule for the project because it's critical to our operations, or it'll have that much of an impact? Or is this something that we might be able to put off until after the implementation, or maybe we don't even do because, you know, it might be the term that I use, it might be $100 solution to a $10 problem. So you have to have somebody who's looking at all of this all of the time and really staying focused on what the core scope is, what the objectives are for the project, and making sure that everything that's being done within the project is aligned to drive toward a successful completion of that project on scope, on budget, and on schedule. So in summary, it really is, you want to be able to identify, you need to be able to identify ahead of time, communicate and manage what needs to be done, when, by whom, and what level of quality. I have that underlined because that's really to summarize it all. And to be able to do that, you need to have somebody who is able to take that step back, has the time to be able to do that, and has the knowledge of an implementation to be able to understand what the implications are, what's coming next, that type of thing. They're going to be working side by side with your implementation partner. They're going to be focused on the client side of the implementation. And if you have a strong collaborative relationship with the implementations project manager, things can go extremely well. If you don't have somebody who can really manage that project well within the client, then the implementation partner's project manager has to take on more of that responsibility, and that detracts from their ability to manage their own implementation deliverables. They also don't have the knowledge, they don't have the awareness of everything that's going on. They might not even have the time to manage a lot of the details that have to occur within the organization. So you have to be able to manage your own resources and deliverables. You also have to work side by side with that vendor project manager to manage theirs. But if they've got a good project manager, that's something you're just working, you're making sure that that's happening. Okay. And just to sort of summarize, for a project like this, there are several things that we need to make sure that we have in place. And on the left side for the organization, you need to have executive commitment. That's one of the key things that you need to have. If you don't have that, the rest of it really can't hold together. Steering committee and sponsor. So you can have an executive sponsor who is part of that steering committee. Steering committee is generally C-level people within the organization who can make decisions for that organization. The core team has to be available. They're going to be spending anywhere from 40 to 60% of their time on an implementation like this. And that has to be something that the executive leadership is aware of and supports completely, and that they help emphasize that this is something that the core team needs to be committed to. Commitment and willingness to change. The system will be different, especially if you're going from a 20-year-old system to a new system. The system will be different. The processes that you use are going to be very different from what you've done in the past. A lot of the tools that you have, you're going to have a lot of automation that you didn't have before, all of that type of thing. And so you need to be willing to change the way you do things. And the distinction that I make is the what and the how. What you need to accomplish still needs to be accomplished. How you accomplish it will change significantly. And the more you're willing to adopt best practice processes that are delivered by the new system and defined by your team and the implementation partner, the better you're going to be able to take advantage of that new system. Timely decision-making is really critically important. The delays in making decisions or not being able to make decisions have one of the biggest effects on a project and its success. And then the communication we've already talked about within the organization. On the right side, this is really where the rubber hits the road. You have all this stuff on the left, but you have to have that active project management. You have to have somebody who is focused on this. This is their main job. This is what they're tasked with delivering, and they have to be in a position to be able to manage that project in detail. They have to manage all the issues that come up, make sure that the scope is being addressed correctly. Any technical issues are being addressed, whether it's connectivity, if it's a remote system, or barcode integration, if you have that integration with other, whether it's your HR systems, all of that type of thing. Change management, and there's really two aspects of change management. There's the organizational change management, making sure that the work procedures are defined and all of that type of thing. There's technical change management as well. There's the change control within the project. And risk management. There are a lot of risks. You have to be able to identify them ahead of time and mitigate those risks. And so really this all falls under the project management. Project team with the project manager as the leader is responsible for an awful lot within this project, and having that strong project leader who's focused on it and looking at the futures is the critical thing for making sure that this is a successful implementation. So with that, I guess we'd like to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions. Brad, does anything come in?
Yeah, so first off, thank you, Joe. That was very insightful. Hopefully those of you who joined us found it that way. We did have a couple questions in, and thank you, Mary, for letting us know about the screen. So hopefully that was resolved. And we will be sending out that deck to you guys all after this in case you need to follow up, as well as a recording. But again, if anyone has questions, please go ahead and submit those. It looks like we did have one or two come in. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with this first one. If a company is looking to implement new enterprise software, doesn't the software implementer already have a project manager that will manage the project?
Yeah, that's actually, that probably came in before I talked through the thing. So yes, the implementation partner will have a project manager. They're generally going to be fairly strong people that understand how to manage the implementation, but their main focus, their primary focus, and really what you want them to be focused on is managing their own resources and their own deliverables. There's a lot of stuff that's critically important that the implementation partner has to do. They have to get the system set up. They have to be the ones to train the project team on how to use the system. They have to make sure the configuration is done correctly. They have to make sure that the team knows how to get the data into the system, all of that type of thing. And they have to support and answer the questions as they go along. But as we talked about earlier, most of the work within the project is really part of the client and not part of the implementation team. And the implementation partner's project manager is focused on their side of it, you need to have somebody on the client side focused on the client deliverables.
All right, great. Another one we have came in is, can you describe the difference between project management and active project management? I know you talked about it, but can you maybe articulate what the difference is a little more?
Sure. Project management, when spoken about generically, people will often think of it as things like, scheduling, reporting on status of things, reporting on completion of activities, reporting on the budget, reporting on, et cetera. It's reactive, it's retrospective. When we say active project management, we're really talking about the proactive, the main focus being looking forward. You're trying to identify those things that are upcoming, whether it's an activity that's needed to be able to make sure that you're staying on schedule, or a potential risk that's coming down the road, or a decision that's going to need to be made that'll impact activities down the road, that type of thing. So active project management is that taking a step back and really understanding where the project is going, what the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks need to look like for that project to be able to stay on track, rather than how did we do over the last 2 weeks or 4 weeks within the project.
Great. All right, again, if anyone has questions, please go ahead and submit those now. We do have a few more minutes, so I'll let people just sort of take it in, and if you have a question, please submit that. If you want to learn more about Liberty Technology Advisors and what we offer, and maybe talk more about an ERP implementation or assessment that you're looking to do, please reach out to us. Our contact information is on the screen, both mine and Joe's information, email, and phone number. We are available and happy to talk. It looks like we have one more that just came in. When working with a company, Joe, who is responsible for establishing the nice to have and the need to have business requirements? Is that something that's done beforehand by the project team? Does LTA do that? The software implementer?
So in the end, it's got to be the company, but that's got to be facilitated by the project manager, and it's done in conjunction with the implementation partner. And the reason I say that is you have to look at any particular change that that becomes apparent during the project, any potential change that comes up during the project, and you have to be able to understand the impact of it. You have to understand the benefits of it, but also the cost, meaning both time and dollars, of making that particular change to a project. And so once you've defined the scope ahead of time, and so an awful lot of that nice to have and need to have happens ahead of time, but during the project, you're also going to have things that come up. And you might identify something during the project that you say, if we make this change, it'll have a significant positive impact on our processes or our data quality or whatever it happens to be. And so you have to be able to understand the implications, long-term operational implications of it, and the effort that it takes to do it. And so that's where the project manager for the client, understanding the business, and the project manager for the implementation partner, understanding the implications within the system, would work together to determine whether or not, one, it's something that, on the client side, is it something that would provide value to the client? And two, on the system side, what the implications are of making that change so that you can make the right decision on it.
Great. Well, no other questions have come through. So again, if you have questions, please go ahead and send them to us. We will be sending out a follow-up email with recording and the deck. And we hope you found today's presentation helpful and informative, and look forward to having you join us in the future. So thank you, Joe, and thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thanks a lot, everybody.